Namaste, everyone. Welcome to the Cārvāka podcast. I'm really excited to have once again on the podcast Dr. Gobardhan Das. Thanks for coming on the podcast, sir.
Thank you, Vishal. Thanks for having me here today. And I would like to thank all the listeners, all the viewers for joining us here today. And this is a difficult time, but we should try to, keep calm and stay at home and try to get this bad times over.
So Dr. Saab, I wanted to start with so obviously it's very interesting because my first podcast with you was also on tuberculosis, but that was on a completely different research that you were conducting, and this time you're once again interestingly back on the podcast to discuss about something to do with tuberculosis and a BCG vaccine. But this time the vaccine seems to be as per, and you've been on the news. I mean, I've been following you. The other day I also saw you on CNN IVN. You were there with Naresh Rehan and Dr. N.K. Mehra was over. All of you were there and you were making your cases. So it's very interesting that you're back on the podcast and we're discussing something related to tuberculosis. This being is a vaccine. So, sir, my first question to you is that. I mean, I've been trying to follow up whatever you've written and said in the media, but I would request you on behalf of everyone who watches this podcast, because the kind of viewership this podcast has is people who are interested in details. They are interested in the technical sides of things, and they want to hear more of that stuff. So can you, I'll request you to, can you give us a brief idea about what the BCG vaccination is and what is the hypothesis that you are presenting in front of everybody? So how do we go about it? So how is there this pre-immunity that you have stated because of the BCG vaccine, and how does it work in respect to COVID-19?
Okay, so basically, I should start from here. See, BCG was developed with the intention for tuberculosis vaccine, and this has been invented in 1921, almost a century now, and it works perfectly fine for disseminated TB in young children and also meningitis in young children. But however, it fails for preventing the adult pulmonary TB. So within this century, within last almost 100 years, there are many countries actually that's adapted immunization, vaccination. Many countries, because there's no efficacy in adult, they actually dropped and then actually discontinue vaccination. And some of the countries actually they never vaccinated with BCG. So we have all the whole spectrum. So the if you look at the basically, although BCG was invented or started immunization with the intention for protection against TB, but later on it has been found TB actually protects many other diseases. For example, leprosy, Bureli ulcer, and bladder cancer. Bladder cancer we use BCG, and also trials for many other cancers. And also recently, it has been shown it has efficacy against type 1 diabetes. And in monkey model, primate model, it has been shown. So if it is given early in life, that means in young children, in young pups, so they actually help in reducing all respiratory infections and sepsis. That are also experiment being done. So basically, from here, what I'm trying to say, BCG, although was intended for TB, but it turned out to be, it does many other things. It protects from many other diseases other than TB also. So why we are saying that there is a correlation? Definitely, I'm talking about inverse correlation with the COVID-19 susceptibility or the occurrence and or mortality. Why? That because when we have seen incidents in China when it spread out, and spread out throughout the world, when we saw there is a countries where the BCG is being given, and the incidences, not only incidences but also mortality is much less. And subsequently what we have seen is basically the there is a huge difference. I can share the data, not yet our published data. We have seen those countries who are immunized in even in the childhood, those are very protected across the in age, that is immaterial. And also, here is another interesting thing. What we found, those who discontinued that vaccination, they show the intermediate phenomena, just in between. So from here, what we have concluded, there must be some link with the BCG immunization with the COVID susceptibility or COVID occurrence and the mortality. So now the question, the why inside with this, although we should talk about the layman term in the media, but being a scientist, I am always trying to find out what could be the mechanism behind it. The last few years, as people had the very doubt why a BCG will, those being immunized in the young children will protect a person who is more than 60 years old or so. And especially when people know this is a BCG vaccination really doesn't work for adult pulmonary TB. What was the intention? So last few years, what we see in upon immunization of BCG, there are something called innate memory response and also something called trained immunity, which are the one actually, although innate response may not have the memory, but it has been shown that upon BCG immunization, there is a changes programming of some stem cells that lead to the whole life effect, what we can see. Although this has not been experimentally proven, but definitely these kind of things are working right at this moment, what we feel. But one thing I can once again can say, there's a very inverse correlation with the given the BCG versus the COVID occurrence and the mortality. I can tell you very good one example. For example, is like Spain. As you know, the Spain is the right now is the second highest incidences and the mortality. The Spain, they never got the BCG vaccination. However, the neighboring country, Portugal is always adopted the BCG vaccination. And although the weather is climate is almost same, food habit is almost same, genetically they are maybe very close, still in the incidences and the mortality in the fatality in Portugal is very dramatically less with compared to that of Spain. And if you see the countries like US, the Italy, they never been vaccinated with BCG, and that is what they are very susceptible. On the other hand, the countries like India, countries like Portugal, countries like Brazil, though are always given the BCG, and we see there is the difference, right? So that is what we thought. There is indeed there is a correlation. And in fact, when this was, I proposed it in social media in 16th of March. Within few days, I saw there is a number of papers are coming out. Within week or days, 10 days, I saw the the Germany, Australia, Netherlands, UK. They are all now are started revaccination with the BCG, and there is a certain correlation indeed. So that is, I think, there is certain correlation, and that is good for us.
So, sir, I just wanted to understand this a little bit more. So, what exactly happens? So, let's say I am an average citizen of ABC area, and I live in this area, and I maybe potentially might be, coming into contact with COVID-19. Now, when I have this BCG vaccination, and let's assume a person like me, I am 39 years old, and I live in this hot and humid climate. So now, what is the correlation coming out to be? Is it BCG alone per se, or is BCG with a combination of other factors? Just like I'll give you an example. When I had Dr. Mehra in my previous podcast, Dr. Mehra was also raising a point about how in India we tend to have a better microbial load. So our innate immunity seems to also benefit us. So would that be also have to be factored in something like this when we create a correlation, or there is enough data where it is statistically significant even if we remove the microbial load aspect aside and we just look at it from the pure BCG vaccination point of view?
Uh, yeah, this is a very good question. So let me try to divulge one by one slowly. In India, countries like India, where we call there is a hygiene index. So basically, we have the lower hygiene index. So once we are suppose vaccinated with BCG, there are certain immune responses are being generated, and that is in the memory. When that is in the memory, because of this memory, if it's not, if our immune system do not see the similar bugs or similar pathogen in future, that memory probably over a period of time slowly fades away. However, because of or exposure of various organisms, in this case, I would like to talk about the environmental mycobacteria, which is very similar to our BCG. There may be many times there is exposure, so our memory response is continuously renewed. So one thing. Second thing is because of exposure to the various organisms. So our basal immune responses, especially innate immune responses, are always higher than those who are in the highly hygiene countries like US. So basically, because of our basal immune response is higher, the moment the bugs, the pathogen which comes, we take, and before they actually adapt in our body within our system, they are being eliminated. So that is what oftentimes what we see, even though we are exposed to the certain not only COVID-19, here we are talking about COVID-19, in many other cases, when even though we are exposed to the harmful pathogens, still we do not get the disease because of our basal innate immune response is always higher than those who are living in the high 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 index hygiene countries like US.
So, doctor, how would we go about this? So, another thing that I wanted to understand even further was that what exactly does the BCG vaccine do? I know you have explained it, but I wanted to dig in further because I'm more curious as you were explaining that. So, what is happening exactly inside our body when this virus, this COVID-19 virus, is trying to cause us harm? So, so could you explain a bit of the technicality even more? That how
Sure.
does this BCG vaccination help us? In what sense does it help?
Yes. So basically, it's BCG vaccination. If it there is a innate memory. So because of innate memory, as you know, innate immune works is almost like a works. It is not very specific. That is what we call it innate. So when there is bugs are coming, they are being eliminated by the activation of innate immune response. One of the innate immune response is the production of interferons. As you know, the virus for the treatment of many viruses, interferon, type 1 interferons are given. So innate immune response produces interferons. Not only that, the activation of innate immune responses lead to the production of various inflammatory cytokines. For example, IL-6, IL-12, TNF-alpha, interleukin-1. Those are all at leads to the activation of innate immune cells such as macrophages. Those actually engulf this invaded pathogen, and then chew it off. They kill it, and there's several killing mechanism. The number one, of course, the production of nitric oxide, oxygen radicals, so on and so forth. And because of this innate immune activation, that leads to the activation of the specific lymphocytes. Here in this case, in viral infection, they lead to the activation of cytotoxic T cells. The cytotoxic T cells, when they see there is an infected cell, they immediately come and lyse the cells. So that is what this virus really cannot make a home or they infect the cells, and the moment the virally infected cells, the cytotoxic T cells see, they immediately go and kill them. So basically, is almost like a circular target. The moment there is exposure to this organism, the virus, that leads to the activation of the innate immune response, and that immune response is even the faster. That's because of the previous exposure, which is in the memory, and then that lead to the activation of the cytotoxic T cells, and cytotoxic T cells later on they kill these targets.
So, sir, let's get into a few of the studies. I mean, I want to thank Anand also, because Anand had sent a couple. I want to focus on a couple of the studies which were also making points that you have been making. One was by Sergei Dolgik, and the other was one by the NYIT College of Osteopathic Medicine in the New York Institute of Technology by Aaron Miller and Mac Josh Riandler. So both the studies seem to make the same claims that you have been making here. But I just had a few questions and queries in regards to now the case of UK seems to be very peculiar, because I was looking up into the data here, and I think UK was giving BCG vaccination to its citizens till the year 2000. But if we look at the numbers in UK, they still seem to be slightly higher than other countries. Let's say, as you have given us the example of Portugal and Spain. Now, so what could be the possible reason for UK? Second, I also had another follow-up question about Iran. I mean, I know you did mention Iran, but Iran also had a BCG vaccination, albeit they started it a little late. I think it's in the year 1984, if I remember correctly. It was mentioned in the Aaron Miller study that Iran started in 1984. Third point is now China, which is, I mean, it is the epicenter of the virus. I mean, the virus has started from China and spread across the world. As far as I know, China does give the BCG vaccine too, right? So why are we having these variations as far as the BCG vaccination and the infection rate are concerned?
Okay, so basically, let's go one by one. Let's talk about Iran first. Iran is, as you see, Iran started BCG vaccination program in 1984, which is 84 means there is 16 plus 12, around 27, 28 years, right? So as you know, the COVID susceptibility towards mostly in the elderly people, those who are 50 plus and or 60 plus population. So basically, if the Iran started vaccinating people just 27 years, already the elderly people they missed it. So basically, in their case, probably is not. That is what we can see, higher incidences and mortality. So Iran. In China, so that is entirely different ball game. There are three different reasons. Number one, in China, the is mostly outbreak was in Wuhan, and this is the small pocket. So basically, and they have been controlling in a very different manner. Still, within that pocket, we see there is a huge incidences, and that might be because during the Great Famine time in Mao time, which is 1958 to 1963, and those time and thereafter also they missed most of the vaccination, BCG vaccination, and there are huge irregularities, and that could be one of the reason. And third thing is, of course, one we talk about, then there is nothing called 100% foolproof. And of course, the your genetic variation is also the one of the important factor. In fact, a person, the immune response with the same antigen or the same bugs may differ may differ greatly. So basically, it once again depends on the genetic variations. So basically, in China, what I feel, there are three reasons. Number one is many people, they actually missed that BCG vaccination during the Great Famine, and also because of only small pocket we are talking about Wuhan, and third thing, we are probably there is some genetic differences in there as well. So the three things. Now coming to the UK, as you know, UK only thing is what I can see, the UK is some kind of, it's not the very highest, at not the very lowest, which is basically in the middle curve. And that middle curve, once again, and could be because of, as I said, number one cause would be hygiene index. So maybe they are vaccinated, but their vaccine efficacy over a period of time, they probably they faded away, and faded away because your immune system did not find the second incidence or something in this period of time, and so therefore their immune response might be slowly fading away. Number two. Number three, once again, there could be some genetic differences with respect to other countries. And fourth number reason could be the climate also. Is a climate, as you know, the Covid-19, which is almost what we call it the flu virus, right? Type, right? Every virus has a time, it comes in a phase and it goes away. And basically there is a huge winter, and it comes in winter. That is what there may be some environmental or climate effect is also maybe working in that fashion, and that is what we see. There is a temporal more mortality or incidence with compared to those who received BCG vaccination. But once again, still in UK, the curve is not as high as US or Spain, right?
Okay, sir. So I had one more question now. So in one of your interviews, I think it was reader.com, if I remember correctly, you had suggested that at least as a first measure, you were recommending giving the BCG vaccination again to at least our healthcare workers, the frontline workers,
Yeah.
or the sanitization staff and stuff like that. Now, it led me to a follow-up question and it could be one of the reasons that I'm relating it to UK too, that could also one of the reasons is, as you had mentioned in the beginning of the podcast itself, that the effectivity of the vaccine over the period of years keeps on reducing. So could that be also one of the reasons that as we know, this virus tends to harm the elderly the most? So does that make the case then, in that case, that irrespective of where you live, as of now, the government should at least make it a point to give the BCG vaccinations to people with comorbidities, elderly people, and along with that, all the healthcare workers who are attending to the patients.
Vishal, actually, this is a great question. Actually, you are absolutely right. As you know, this is uh, your memory response or the immune responses against or the vaccine efficacy fades away slowly over a period of time, and so therefore, this is one of the reason could be our elderly people or the elderly population is higher susceptible to the COVID-19 infection. And as for replenishing your immune system or the keeping in the memory once again, it has to be exposed again. So that is what I thought is it is better to go for the revaccination once again. And not only that, that I proposed in the 16th of March. Thereafter, I see there are many countries like Australia, the UK, now Netherlands, the Germany, Germany also, UK also, they actually used to vaccinate. Now they stop. They are revaccinating again, and this is the probably this is the reason. And I wrote to our science minister, honorable science minister, on 16th or 17th, why not to revaccinate at least the targeted population. As you see, we really don't need to revaccinate the young group because they are not susceptible to COVID-19 infection. But those who are elderly and those who are the health worker, like health professionals, doctors, nurses, and other health professionals, and those who are taking care of the COVID-19 patients at home, and those who are in high risk group, can we do revaccination? And in there also, what I said is not only the BCG, but we have even better strain than BCG that is already passed the phase 1 clinical trial or probably phase 2 clinical trial and already given to the human, and which is MIP, Mycobacterium indicus pranae. So I wrote to our honorable science minister, and and he directed me to talk to ICMR DG. And good thing is I see that in yesterday our CSR DG on ABP News, he mentioned that they're working with Cadila for doing a clinical trial with MIP same strain I'm talking about. But somehow I don't know. I only saw in TV interview. That's it, and that's what I think. What we are in a right track, and I think we should reconsider for the revaccination, and already other countries are doing, which is Australia, UK, Germany, Netherlands, all of many countries are redoing again.
So one more question, sir. So you just mentioned you're already working on something which is slightly different from the BCG vaccination, but it is in the same ballpark, as they say. So could you further explain to us what
Yeah.
exactly is this thing that you're working on, and how is it slightly different from the original BCG vaccination?
Yeah. See, I mean, Vishal, when being an immunologist and what as see, first we have to, as those who are in layman term, there are two, three things we have to, take care of. Number one, first we have to understand for the elimination of a virus what we need. Number one, for elimination of a virus, we need the type 1 interferons. which is coming from the innate immune cells, for example, macrophage, right? And second thing, we need the, as I mentioned, we need the cytotoxic T cells. And third thing is we need the activation of innate immune system so that it can help better T cell responses. That keeping three things in mind. So if you give the BCG, certainly we get this the type 1 interferon, we get the innate activation, so and so forth. But if we modify this BCG little bit, so that your antigen actually for the activation of CD8 T cells, the which is cytotoxic T cell, the antigen presentation has to, I'm sorry, I'm going in a little bit of science. Hopefully, if anybody has any question, I can re-explain again. For activating cytotoxic T cell, the antigen has to be presented in a MSC class 1 presentation pathway, which has to be that means this antigen has to be synthesized in the cytosol. So, and when with the non-pathogenic strain of BCG is taken up with this macrophage, which present the antigen, actually they go in the phagolysosomal pathway, though basically it doesn't mount too much of cytotoxic T cells. So there is a strain already is in India, and they are in the Serum Institute. They are preparing, making this producing for vaccine trial against TB, and that strain actually fantastically goes, actually that is genetically modified and goes in the cytosol and mounts better cytotoxic T cell response. So what our proposal was, so in that strain, if we use that strain as a base, you get your a type 1 interferon, we get activation of innate immune response, and third thing, they're likely to get more cytotoxic T cell response. And on that, what we proposed, can we express COVID-19 protein? As you know, for elimination of the virus, another things we need the neutralizing antibodies. And for neutralizing antibodies, so as you know, this is BCG is not COVID, or so therefore there is no specific antibody against COVID. So what we intend to do, if we express or if we make recombinant BCG on this strain expressing COVID-19 protein, that will give you one thing, is your type 1 interferon, activation of innate immune responses, more cytotoxic T cell response, and because of this protein we get more of an antibody response, a neutralizing antibody response. So, and because of this, when there is antibodies produced, it needs the help from the T cells. I'm sorry, I'm going in the scientific term. And when a T cell helps the B cell for making antibodies, and then it goes to the memory response. What it means, basically, once you are immunized, that immune response will go to your memory and it will be lifelong. In contrast, the many vaccines such as flu, this is every year you have to revaccinate the flu vaccine. Why? Because they are simply eliminating the kind of innate immune response, and then it goes away, but they doesn't go in the memory response. So in being a scientist, what we proposed, basically we have to discover a vaccine or in a genetically modified in such a way that we get all the responses and also go in the memory, so that once you are immunized, that memory will be restored for lifelong. That is our proposal.
So if I was to understand this correctly, so what you are trying to do through this vaccination and through the trials that you are doing is, so I'll use a computer analogy where, so what you want to do is basically install a permanent, constantly updating antivirus in an operating system, the operating system being the human body right now, and whenever the virus, this particular virus, tries to infect our body, that antivirus inside our body will automatically find it and defeat it and defend the body. Have I understood it correctly?
It is, but in a slightly different way. That's because see, this is in computer memory, basically, in immune memory. So if you don't use it, it goes and sits, and they don't do anything. But the moment it comes, and immediately they attack. So basically, the length of time for reaction is almost immediate. So basically, so right now, if I give this, if right now if I immunize, that immune response will be very high, and then that will subside and coming almost like a zero, and only the cell which are the lymphocytes which actually restore the memory, they will come, and then they will some of them will become memory, and then they will simply remember and sit, and they are not going to do anything. So in future, anything when there is exposure, immediately they will come and see, and then immediately they will kill.
All right. So doctor, I now want to take a few questions from the people who are watching live. So a few of them had these questions from you. Some could be about the BCG vaccination, some could be about testing protocols. So I'm just going to go one by one. So Aditya wants to know, should we be focusing on antibody tests instead of RT-PCR so we can mass test and get people back to work and start the economy like Germany has?
Well, this is a very, very good question. I really appreciate that. So basically, to me, actually, there is a very positive and negative, both the sides of antibody testing. That's because when there is antibody testing, antibody when is produced upon infection, when the infection is resolved, still antibody he hangs around for some time. So basically, if in places like India, we know there are many people are kind of exposed to maybe COVID-19, and they mounted the antibody response, and then we really don't know when the infection happened. Maybe the mild and then is resolved, but still antibody is there. If you only detect only with antibodies, what is going to happen is basically you see there are many people all of a sudden say, "Oh, we are infected," and then there may be panic situation, and so therefore we have to confirm with the PCR, the where we are looking at the looking at the amplification of genetic material by PCR reaction. So for to avoid that, and also this is it is impossible to do the to do test all the 130 crore people. So for that I had a different kind of proposal, but so far I don't Germany is started doing the same thing, although they are doing a little different protocol. My proposal would be, so in a family we have, suppose in a family of 10. So if you mix all the collect the blood and then mix it, or the collect the sample, mix it, and then do one antibody test. If you do that antibody test in that, suppose in a population, so in a family there are 10, the highly likely the most of the families they will be negative, so don't do anything. And if there's somebody is positive, then you go ahead and segregate the people. This is individually, and test it with antibodies as well as the PCR reaction. Otherwise, per PCR reaction is kind of almost the 5,000 rupees, and also it's 4 hours, and liver intensive and technology intensive. So that is what it is almost impossible to do.
All right, sir. So Poonam has asked, just wondering, do those who are PPD positive because of being exposed to tuberculosis by living among the patients, do they also have similar immunity as those who get BCG?
Once again, this is another thing I tend to propose that because in India there is a huge number of people are exposed to the to environmental mycobacteria, and also we are BCG vaccinated. Oftentimes, a huge population are PPD positive, and those who actually are PPD positive and highly likely they are protected from the COVID-19 infection. And I was proposing some experiment. Indeed, is a very nice question. Indeed, one should work it out whether those who are severely ill with COVID-19 infection, whether they have the PPD positivity or not, and those who got the mild infection and readily cured without going in the in ICU, and see whether they have whether they are mounting PPT responses. It is, yeah.
So this question was more on the operational part, but I wanted to know your views irrespective of that. So somebody has asked, considering BCG vaccine is effective and the hypothesis is correct and is tested, what is the availability in India, and how is it going to be possible to carry out such a mass vaccination in a particular span of time? Yeah, what are your views on that, doctor?
Okay, so basically already I talked about it. I said this is in India there is every child born. So basically every newborn receives BCG vaccination. So we have certain amount of stock. So we do have stock, and we are not really proposing mass vaccination. Rather, we are proposing the targeted vaccination. What I mean targeted vaccination, those who are elderly or those who have the high risk, the health professionals, and those who are in home taking care of the COVID-19 patients. So basically, in that rationale, we can actually vaccinate or revaccinate with the BCG or whatever our strains we are proposing, and that with the targeted population, not to everybody.
Okay, one more question by somebody. Poonam again says, doesn't the body make the type 1 interferons at some point under certain conditions, and does it not trigger the immunity?
Well, type 1 interferon is produced by mostly the innate immune cells with the macrophage and dendritic cells. And it's not that only BCG or MTB triggers it. It can be triggered by the many other pathogens, but certainly. But as you know, the innate immune response doesn't restore the memory. So basically, we need type 1 interferon when there is infection. For in mostly in viral infection, we see there is a huge upregulation of in type 1 interferons. Right.
Arindrajit has a question. He says, how effective will be the vaccine looking at the mutation rate of the virus? Are there any trials going on for medication for those who are affected? What is the probability of recurrence in October 2020 with a new signature?
Once again, this question is in three parts. So vaccine, it works in three ways. Number one, because of the rate of mutation. Of course, if it mutated like very rapidly, we may not see that effective vaccination. However, to get more effective vaccination, we should not depend on only one antigen. So basically, if you target more antigens, so if I can enter in little bit of science, what we proposed is when we are trying to make a recombinant BCG that express COVID-19 proteins, first what we are going to do is actually try to generate the antibody response with multiple proteins. Once we get the multiple antibody response from the multiple antigens, we can map the epitopes on which the antibody is raised. Then all the epitopes from the different antigen and then stitch together. Of course, by recombinant technology, you stitch together and make a new kind of antigen. And so therefore, what we are trying to get, the multiple antibodies, neutralizing antibodies directed against multiple antigens. So there will be the very rare chance that a virus will mutate it with all the proteins in at a time. So therefore, there is a very little chance that we get the vaccine is may not be going to work. Number one. And when we are talking about the innate immunity, basically your innate immunity is not specific. So we do not need actually the specific immunity as well. That is the second thing. And the third question that he had is probably that cost of
the recurrence of the virus in October 2020.
yes,
With a new
very nice. As I mentioned that this is almost like a flu. It has always a phase. It will actually is next year it may come back again, and it come back maybe with some mutation too. That's absolutely he's right, and we have to be prepared with the drug, and the vaccine. And as you know, there is no specific drug, although people are trying to get one. But in absence of a specific drug, the huge research is going on for repurposing of the drug. One of the repurposing drug, as is is hydroxychloroquine. We keep on talking about hydroxychloroquine works like at least in COVID patients, it blocks the cytokine storm, which is the one of the biggest reason for fatality in COVID patients. So in some part, and at least certain amount of protection we get because of if we are given the hydroxychloroquine. Yes.
So, sir, considering the probabilities of the virus coming back again, maybe with a slightly different signature, this question becomes interesting. Then, will those who have recovered from COVID-19 develop some sort of a lifelong immune memory or a response of the response? So let's say the virus comes back next year again, or maybe in October or whenever. So, will those who are infected, would they have an innate response in them?
Yeah. So very nice. Actually, maybe she might be immunology student. I don't know. But see, when there is many infections, once it happens, they are basically protected for lifelong. In some others, it doesn't. Depending on whether memory is restored. Basically, this is a new virus. We do not know yet. So if antibody is produced and then it is in the memory, certainly it should protect from next year, and as long as the memory response exists, they should be protected. However, if not, the antibody produced is T cell independent antibodies, or the B cell memory is not that strong. So basically, that may protect for a year, and then next year that may not be protected. Like in a flu, every year you need to take the vaccination every year. It depends. This virus is new; we do not know yet, but hopefully we get it. Yeah.
So doctor, just one last question before I let go of you. So I just had this query. So when I was talking to Dr. Narendra Mehra, so he was of the opinion that yes, the government has extended the lockdown till the 3rd of May. In his view, the lockdown should not have been 2 more weeks. It should have been 4 more weeks, so that we completely flatten the curve, get rid of the virus, and go for it. Albeit, he said that I do understand the economic cost of it. So yes, the government has announced the triad strategy where they'll have three zones, the blue, green, and red zones. So I wanted to know your views before, we wrap things up. What are your views? How long do you think the lockdown should be? And what do you think about, let's say, by the 20th of April, there might be hundreds of districts in India that actually don't get a COVID positive case. And now that we are going to get those rapid pool testing kits, I think they are already in India, or they are coming in a couple of days, and they're going to be dispatched all across India. And when we really ramp up our testing through those tests, so do you think it makes sense that after the 20th of April, or maybe after 3rd of May, at least we start opening up all those sectors that are basically not recording any case, and they can be allowed limited movement at least in those areas?
See, Kushal, that if I start from the beginning, so in India, because of that we are lucky, it at least two things it worked. Very early lockdown that actually saved us a huge, and that is the most smart move the our honorable Prime Minister did. And second is probably, as I said, our base immune response is high, so that also worked for us. And 3 weeks lockdown, it was absolutely justified, and everybody agreed with that. And next we have another 2 weeks of lockdown, and also I agree with that 2 weeks. That's because of it's a balance. As you see, this is economic, and the economy, and of course the health is a balance. Good thing is here one thing I would like to mention, because of in 3 weeks of lockdown, we could easily identify the hotspots, right? In these hotspots, if you majority of the cases in these hotspots. So if we extend another 2 weeks of this lockdown, probably most of the infection will be contained in certain areas. After 2 weeks, I think we can open, except those who are in a hotspot, and they should be kept in lockdown until the curve is flattened. So that is what I believe. In my opinion, the 3 weeks plus 2 weeks is a perfectly smart idea. And after 2 weeks, let's see how it goes, where the virus are contained, which area, which hotspot, and those hotspot can be lockdown can be extended in those hotspots, not everywhere.
All right. So I guess it's time to wrap things up. Once again, on behalf of myself and everybody who watches the Cārvāka podcast, I really want to take this opportunity to thank you, Dr. Das, because these are technical issues, and I really appreciate that you have explained it to all of us in a very patient manner, and I sincerely hope that the government listens to you, and I'm really looking forward to the proudest moment for us as Indians would be that the Indians find out the true solution to COVID-19. So if it comes from India, I think it ranks well for us as a country, and it ranks well for humanity too. If we can save human lives in the process, and that too even faster. So also on behalf of all of us, I once again say thanks a lot for coming on the podcast and enlightening us, sir.
Thanks, Kushal. Another small point I would like to see. This is right at this moment. We all are united as one nation, irrespective of the race, color, and religion, and the party we belong. So we are all together. Let's work together, and we will win. COVID will lose. Okay, let's work together.
I couldn't agree more with you. So guys, it's time to wrap things up. If you like what I'm doing over here, please share the video, tell everybody to watch this. not only this, all the podcasts that I've had on COVID, I think it's very important to educate people. Let us not panic about this. We can easily defeat this, as Dr. Mehra has said, Dr. Das has said. Before that, Dr. Anupam Singh was saying the same thing. We just need to practice a few precautions and cooperate with our healthcare workers, cooperate with our scientists, cooperate with our governments. We can easily beat this. So on that note, I would like to say namaste, goodbye, good night,
Namaste. Goodbye.
take care.
Good night.